the industry is still really young. As much as I've been flying over the last 5 years, it's still really new. And there's a lot of growth to be had, but it has to kind of be done really smartly. And getting in too early in the wrong direction is just sort of a dead end.
You're listening to the Drone Radio Show podcast, the show about drones and the people who use them for business, fun, and research. Hosted by Randy Goers.
Hello, everyone. This is Randy Goers, and welcome to the Drone Radio Show podcast, episode 189. What do you do when the drone industry gives you lemons? If you ask today's guests, they would say, of course, find a way to make lemonade. Stephen Flynn and his wife, Susan Talbot, are the owners of Sky Tango, a global drone services marketplace providing job booking, support, and aerial footage sales worldwide. Their story mirrors many entering the drone industry. A great idea, a startup, and a journey into the unknown. With a combined 40 years experience in film and television production, in 2012, Susan and Steve set out to create a successful drone videography business. They were one of the first commercially licensed remote aerial filming companies in Ireland. In 2015, they launched the Sky Tango marketplace, and soon after, they were connected with investors and potential major partners. Things looked promising, but in early 2018, the wheels started to come off, and Susan and Steve were forced to walk away from a major deal that just a few months earlier looked so promising. Like many other successful entrepreneurs, Susan and Steve reevaluated their business model, applied what they had learned, and launched a new service. In this edition of the Drone Radio Show, Susan and Steve talk about the challenges of creating their drone startup, why they chose to walk away from a big deal, and how that experience helped them redefine their company's focus. But before we hear from Susan and Steve, I want to thank those of you who are supporting my funding campaign. Now you have the option of making a one-time donation in any amount by going to droneradioshow.com/donate. Whether it's $1, $100, or much more, you can help defray the costs of production and keep the podcast going and growing. And if you want to make a monthly contribution, you can still go to patreon.com/droneradioshow. So let's learn how Susan Talbot and Stephen Flynn of Sky Tango redefined their business model. Let's pick up the interview where I asked the couple to introduce themselves.
My name is Stephen Flynn, and I'm the CEO at Sky Tango, a drone company based here in Dublin.
And my name is Susan Talbot. I'm the co-founder of Sky Tango and operations.
The last time we talked was about a year ago, and at that time, you were just about ready to release a new application designed to reward drone operators for compliance. What's happened since?
12 months ago, we were agonizing over whether or not we were going to accept an investment offer, which we got from an angel group here in Dublin, a tech angel group. And at the end of the day, we decided that we would decline the investment for a couple of reasons. We couldn't agree on terms, but also what we were seeing was that there was a latency within the industry, and we didn't think it was possible or comfortable to reach the milestones that investors generally put on you with the industry expanding at the rate it was going. We made the decision that we wanted to evolve a little more organically and pivot and turn as we decided and came across tools that would work better for drone pilots within the industry. So it was a really difficult decision for us to make, to decline that investment.
So this was really a sizable business deal.
It was a significant investment, and I think we sat at the table with the paperwork. We could have signed it, and we really agonized over this choice of, take the money and get the salaries and get moving. But then it was also kind of coupled with really some pretty steep milestones that we felt that we weren't really sure we could meet in a very short period. And I think that over the last year, we've watched some other companies that have been sort of in that space go out of business, sort of for that very reason. I think it's been really difficult for smaller startups in this industry that don't have 100 million or don't have, large investment to just start going, because the investors can stand over you and really create a lot of stress that you can't control because the market is vacillating very quickly. One day you think, this is where it's going to go, but then, 6 to 8 months later, you find out, oh no, it's slightly different. So we made the choice to kind of step back and kind of lay down in the grass a little bit and focus on our technology and start looking carefully at how we might redeploy it in a different manner. So anyway, that's what we've been doing for last year.
Just to refresh everyone's memory, can you describe the application that you had developed?
The original vision that the platform is really built for is to help reward compliance, right? So when we first started flying drones 5 years ago, it was very difficult to differentiate yourself from unlicensed pilots and people who didn't have insurance and, were undercutting you with rates. So our vision was to bring customers and the pilots and the communities that they fly over together in a way that would reward compliance. And all that technology is there. But what we've really had to come to terms with is, well, we think compliance is a big deal and we know pilots do. There's really no commercial interest in it yet. There's no real enforcement. There's no, once companies get their data, as long as they get it in the can and they're using it, whether they really care about compliance or not is kind of secondary. And I think we're still seeing some of these issues around people who are concerned with compliance, but the FAA isn't staffed up to enforce it. The IAA, the CAA, they were never put out there to police this kind of stuff. So our original vision was to have a platform that would really address those issues.
And this was the application that the angel investor was interested in.
Yeah, that is correct. It was initially presented as a platform that would connect drone flyers with the people who wanted to hire them, with that focus on compliance.
What was it about the deal that you felt was not in your best interest?
There were a couple of things within the contract itself, and this is speaking purely as a startup, not necessarily in the drone industry. For example, the investors wanted to tranche the investment. And while it was a reasonable enough investment, it was small enough not to warrant tranching. Tranching can create huge problems within a startup ecosystem, in my opinion. I understand on one hand their requirement to put safety nets in place for the money that they're handing over. But I also, on the other hand, look at it and say, well, those investors potentially are getting tax relief on that investment that they're giving to you. And also, it's very difficult to engage developers and a whole staff around you and only tell them that this is only good for 6 months, because if we don't meet our milestones in 6 months, it could all go away. So tranching for a startup is not a good idea.
I mentioned this to somebody just last week, and they said if you look online, tranching is referenced as sort of the worst thing you could do as a startup, but also the worst thing you could do as an investor investing in a startup, because it can create a situation where the startup can't pivot. So in an industry like drones, which is really only 4 years old, I know they've been flying longer, but it's so new that, in 6 months, if you've got all your money in development moving in one direction and suddenly you realize you've got to pivot, but you're out of money and you haven't met your milestones, now the investors could decide it's actually in their interest to shut you down and write it off as a tax write-off. So we were just in that place where it was very, very disconcerting, and we chose to sort of hold back. And we think now, looking back a year later, that it was the right thing to do.
So what did you do?
We reevaluated the platform and what it was doing, and we didn't so much pivot as look for other avenues to explore. And one of them was the SBIR project here in Ireland with Smart Cities. It's the Small Business Innovation and Research Fund. And essentially, I know SBIR started, I believe, in the US, but it has been running here for several years too. And essentially, the city comes together and presents problems that they have, and they invite innovative companies to submit solutions for those challenges. And one of the problems that Dublin Smart Cities presented was how to tackle illegal dumping, which is a huge problem here in Ireland, fly tipping. And We submitted an application to that using drones as part of that solution, and we got through their phase 1 feasibility study, and then we went on to complete that and then apply for their phase 2, which is to build a minimal viable proof of concept. And we were essentially starting that entire challenge with quantifying litter from the air using artificial intelligence or machine learning. And we built a sample to do that.
I think the thing to add to that, which is interesting, is one of the reasons they were so excited to work with us is because they were concerned about compliance. So you know that the compliance element is important, but it's still not sort of baked into the entire industry yet. It's still kind of coming at it from different corners. So all the compliance tools and the booking software, it's stuff that we had built in the early days, fed right into that project. So we know it's coming, but it's just not, all the compliance stuff just isn't rolling on fast enough, so that's one of the reasons we're sort of changing a little focus.
So will you be monitoring compliance with local dumping laws, or is it related to the use of video taken by a drone?
Yeah, good question. It's more around the deployment of a drone and leveraging distributed assets. So, as the local government is looking at sending pilots out, in order to cover a large geographic area, being able to use local pilots all basically working off the same platform, but also making sure that they follow, data privacy protection and data security protections around the assets that they're acquiring. Those are the kind of issues that the government was very concerned about, and they wanted a way to make sure that they, when they sent a pilot out, that the stuff that they were acquiring was managed correctly within their guidelines. And that's what our back end does.
In essence, they want to use drones to monitor dumping, but first they want to make sure that they're using drones correctly to do that.
Exactly. They wanted to make sure that the data sets that were being acquired by a drone were legally acquired so that they wouldn't ultimately infect the entire data set that was being used in combination with other data sets. So that was important to them. And the other thing that they really liked about our platform was that we had a distributed network of pilots. So a local authority, for example, could commission a pilot within their own boundaries to do some work, but use our platform to do it. So it kind of, with the way local authorities work here, there was a really high chance that that drone pilot or that small business within that local authority boundary would have gotten money from that local authority to operate. So they were kind of keeping revenue generated in their own communities. So that was an aspect of the platform that they really liked.
How are you changing your overall business plan in response to this experience?
We really just want to get out of the way, right? I think a lot of companies have sort of a vision of being able to manage jobs for pilots and get between them and their customers. And what we decided to do was look at our entire stack and say, you know what, let's open this up and turn it around so that these tools can actually be used from the pilot's perspective for their own company. And whether a county council or a broadcast network or an international, footage library wants to find a pilot, we don't care if they come through us or go directly to the pilot. So in a way, I wouldn't call it open source, but it's improving the pilot's access and giving them our in-house tools to deploy on their own services. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. And maybe another way to look at it is that rather than marketing to the pilots directly, you're now looking for organizations where compliance may be an issue and letting them know that you have tools that can help them address that need.
Yeah, you could put it that way. That element of SBIR and the tools that we developed around illegal dumping, they're just one avenue that we're exploring. And the revenue that we've gotten from that has helped push the whole platform a little bit further down the field with the absence of investment. But we have always had a bias toward the media industry because that's our background. In one sense, where the main platform is concerned, the emphasis has shifted a little bit away from compliance, in fact, and it's more focused on creating workflow tools or tools to increase revenue for the pilot. And although we do have a bias toward the media industry, the whole platform is applicable across many industries, and the compliance element is there sitting, waiting in place for companies that actually have decided, you know what, yeah, we are concerned about the provenance of any product that we create.
Getting back to your current project with the local government, is the technology in place or are you still working on it?
The litter detection it's in place, but it needs another infusion to train the AI a little bit better. The first product that we're launching here in December is a map widget for pilots. And it's a great way to sort of explain how we've changed our focus. And what we're doing is our mobile app now is in both the Apple Store and in Google. And when a pilot goes to run a checklist, which they can do on our platform, they can also put themselves on a live map, which has kind of been there for a while, but it was always on our internal map for our internal clients. But what we've done now is we've created a little code widget that a pilot can now put on their own web page and now start showing live map status and location and booking information just on their own home web page outside of our platform altogether. So whether they get work directly through their website or through us, it doesn't matter to us. Our thumb isn't in that pie. What we're doing is giving a tool so that the pilot's web page can now be an active kind of draw for anyone who lands on their page to help, drive work to them and get someone to pick up the phone and say, oh, look, you're just in this area here. I've got a real estate job, or I've got a quick news job, or I've got something. Can you run out and get this for me? While at the same time, we're also marketing that same live feed to a lot of the largest media companies in the world. So we're trying to open up another channel of traction for the pilots.
Now that you're moving into a different direction, what kind of feedback are you getting from your networks?
The smart cities element of it is very interesting and very positive. One of the abilities we offer in a pilot's dashboard is the ability to connect directly with the landowner and allow the landowner to geofence a property and communicate directly with a pilot their restrictions, if you like. Smart Docklands in Dublin, they're about to launch an 18-month trial with us around the landowner's portal. Essentially what we're trying to do is, we believe at some point that landowners they're going to want to really start getting a seat at the table here and start engaging with what's going on over their head. It's nothing to do with airspace. It's all to do with land owners, land management, where the drone launches and lands. And what we're trying to do is give the pilot a tool to engage with landowners earlier rather than later, so that they can start dealing with landowners on their own terms and not have another platform imposed on them to use. So Smart Docklands here in Dublin is going to help us trial that portal and start engaging with the landowners in their jurisdiction to see, well, what exactly is it? What kind of tools would landowners appreciate using through our platform, and what would help them engage with pilots a little easier, a little quicker? So yeah, from that aspect of it has been very successful.
So what has this experience taught you?
The experience has really taught me to focus more. I think when we started, it was easier to assume that there were a lot of full-time drone pilots. And we think our experience has shown us that most of the drone pilots we know do it maybe half-time. Maybe if they're lucky, they're doing it 3/4 time. There are not a lot of full-time drone companies yet. I think there's a large number of people with drones, cinematographers with drones, people that do other jobs and then go do surveys. And I think tools that can help them generate more revenue and fly their drone more is really kind of where we want to be. The second thing I've learned is that the industry is still really young. As much as I've been flying over the last 5 years, it feels really old to me, but I think to a lot of customers and to the communities we're talking to, it's still really new. And there's a lot of growth to be had, but it has to kind of be done really smartly. And getting in too early in the wrong direction is just sort of a dead end.
I think the one thing that I have learned is that Sky Tango was early, and we are in some ways a solution to a problem that hasn't really raised its ugly head yet. It is all sitting there ready to be utilised once compliance does come to the forefront. But it definitely was a solution to a lingering problem.
Too early to the problem.
Too early to the problem.
I do seem to remember a couple of articles from last year about media companies being sued because the operators didn't get approval for the shots they took.
I'm not familiar with them, but those instances are few and far between. There's not enough of them, in my opinion. I mean, very early on, there was a stock company that were fined upwards of $1 million for stock footage that they had taken over New York without the approval of the FAA. That was one of the very early cases about 3 years ago. But I haven't seen enough enforcement articles, certainly in the last 12 months. I think they're isolated events.
I would also say I'm pretty connected to the pilot network, and some of the pilots I have a lot of respect for are already saying things like, you know what, spending all this time on this particular paperwork or doing this is a waste of time because it doesn't matter if I do it or if I don't do it. They're essentially starting to cut corners. And what we're trying to do is create a tool that, encourages people to do the steps correctly. But because they're doing them correctly, they're going to open up more avenues for work. So it's a longer play, but I think ultimately, if there's pilots out there or cinematographers or people that are flying drones and want to sort of grow in that space, then we'd love to have them as customers,
I believe the last time Steve talked to you, we had just semi-formalized a deal with a large stock library who were super interested in the compliance tagging element of our software. And we had a great vision of moving forward with them. Now, we talked with them over a period of maybe, 6 months trying to get the full product over the line. And in the end, it was actually quite soul destroying. But in the end, they decided that our technology wasn't quite far enough along to suit them at scale. So the whole deal at that time collapsed. So we had to pull that element of what we were selling to our pilots. We are circling back around to them, and then we also are discussing internally the idea of bringing our own stock library back online, which 2 years ago we had a great stock library started, but even our own technology back then was wanting. So we pulled it down about a year ago, and we're now playing with the idea of bringing that back online with a twist. That's one more tool that will be available in the Drone Pilots Toolkit, hopefully next spring.
So would you say that this whole experience over the past year is just part of the process of building a business?
Running a startup in Ireland is great. There's a lot of interesting supports. And I ended up being invited into a founders forum where there's 10 of us been meeting for the last 15 months or so. And we're basically all talking about the difficulties we're having with our companies. And the thing I've learned over time is this is really normal. There isn't a single thing we've gone through that wasn't pretty much on everybody's journey at different levels, right? And I think that it's not so much a roadblock, it's a test. Are you in it for the long haul? Are you in it to grow and make something that has value? Or are you trying to just scramble through it and scale and you're going to jump out at the first bump? So I think for us, we're so committed to this, that we started our drone company 5 years ago, and we had to have some really serious talks about where things were going. And we decided, we can keep this growing at the pace that it is, and we'll bootstrap until we find the right investor. So, if that comes, great. If it's smart money and they're the right type of investor, that's great. If not, we've got enough movement to keep going, and we're really passionate about what we're trying to do. So I think that's the best answer I can give you. It's been bumpy, but it's certainly not a roadblock.
What advice would you offer to others who might find themselves in a similar situation?
I think resilience is a word that springs to mind. You have to have lots of it, because I don't think anybody could fault us if we had decided to throw the towel in at any point over the last 12 months. But we believe in the product that we're trying to create, and we believe that it is a useful tool. And even with the advent of UTM, autonomy, we still believe that there's a huge percentage. I think it splits out somewhere around 80-20. So for, 80% of the industry that will be autonomous, 20% will still be individual drone operators. And we believe we have a product that will cross over both eventually, but is primarily an incredibly useful tool for either individual drone operators and small businesses now, or businesses that have a small fleet of operators. There are big companies out there. Measure is one, Precision Hawk another, Drone Deploy. They are big companies. We hope to eventually have a product that can engage with those platforms as well, but also cater for the individual small business that is using drones. And that could be, ranging from a drone operator that does purely drones, but also a drone operator that also does ground production, that has a full production kit, a director of photography that happens to have a Mavic in his backpack. It's also for those operators. And the beauty of the tools is that it crosses over beautifully from the media industry to other industries.
I'm curious, how difficult was it to integrate machine learning into the application?
I'll give you credit. You're the first person who's actually asked me that. It was our first foray into AI, and I still have an awful lot to learn. I think that there's a lot of data sets around AI that developers can leverage when they're trying to detect, is there a license plate here? Is there a facial recognition? There's a lot of things on AWS that you can kind of tap into with libraries with predefined data sets. The trick with litter is it can be anything and any shape, any color, could be anything, right? So when you're up in the air at the moment, there aren't a lot of data sets around. What does a cup look like? What does a crisp bag or a potato chip bag look like? What does a board? What do these things look like? So that, I think, was a bit tougher than we expected. We got some really good hits on it, and it shows real promise. But when you're finished and the developers say, well, we need another 100,000 images to really train this right, you start thinking, okay, that's a lot of drone flights. How are we going to get out and get enough of that to make this quickly usable? But it's been really interesting. I think the second part of the AI learning curve was that it's good to partner with geospatial companies. There's a lot of companies out there that already do a lot of mapping services and a lot of different things. There are some companies that came up to us after we had built all this that said, we've got a really interesting GIS mapping system that finds light poles or finds very specific things. So there's a lot of companies out there that are looking for drone solutions. And so we're sort of on the prowl now for sort of partners in that space as well. But that's kind of on the long finger.
When we talked a year ago, the message was that drone pilots should be financially rewarded for complying with rules and regulations. Is this still the message today?
We're still pushing that agenda among media buyers and people who hire drones. We're really trying to drive that home, that compliance is really, really important. It's not only important for media, for video footage alone, but it's important for data sets. When you're collecting aerial data sets and then combining them in a file with data sets that have been collected from multiple different sources. Knowing the provenance of the aerial data is still really important. And we're still really pushing that agenda. But what we are focusing on right now are tools to help those pilots that are on our platform and who are thinking of joining our platform to generate more revenue. Regardless of compliance, all of those tool sets are there. If a drone pilot has a customer that is interested in compliance, then we have all the tool sets there for them to follow through with that and say, yeah, this is why I'm charging X, and here's all the paperwork and the audit trail with that. If we have a media buyer who gives a damn about compliance, then they can also say, you know what, I want you to use Sky Tango, or yes, I would like the audit trail delivered with it. So we believe all those tools are sitting there waiting, ready and waiting for a day when it becomes second nature to say, you know what, I want an audit trail with whatever it is that I'm purchasing. But right now, it's not our focus. Until media buyers, until the people who hire drones, use drones, collect data from drones, give a damn, then there's not a whole lot we can do to force that other than push the agenda and say, yes, it is important.
What are the next steps for Sky Tango?
I think sometimes you can get lost trying to build a business, looking at all the research and reading papers and trying to say, oh, this is what's going on, this is where the market is, and this is what we should be doing. And I think we got a bit lost with that. And I think personally, because we fly drones for a living, we have our customers. We've decided to really focus in on the tools that we know we would love, that we use in the field every day, and trust that that's going to resonate, right? Because you can get really lost in market studies and customer development and spend a lot of time spinning on that. But at the end of the day, these are certain tools that don't exist as far as we know in the market, and that's what we're going to do. So we're going to build them, push them out, and starting this December, and hopefully we'll be having a chat with you in a year talking about how great it went.
Is there anything that we missed that we should mention?
One thing we were only having a conversation about this morning was putting a feedback form on our site specifically for pilots to start telling us what kind of tools they would find useful. You know, obviously we wouldn't go out and build one for 2 pilots. But if we start seeing common trends, then that would be something that we could do.
I think one of the other things that's important to point out is that we've made a decision fundamentally inside the business that if someone is going to pay to be on our platform every month, we're not going to collect their data. In the days of Facebook and Twitter and all these companies hoovering up data to sell kind of on their own without the knowledge of the user, it's something personally I just have a real problem with. And Susan and I were talking about it and decided, you know, at the end of the day, it's the pilot's data. And so we don't record anything beyond what a pilot puts in with regard to their checklists and their profiles and the bits that they need to do their jobs.
And for my final question, what message would you like to leave in regard to the future of Sky Tango?
I think at the end of the day, what we're trying to achieve is a platform where pilots feel like it's their tools and that we're working together as a community. Because we are a startup, you know, we're still sort of in that space. We're very flexible and we're really counting on a user base to engage and say, you know, let's support this. And it's a bit like your podcast, you know, you need the support, you need the effort, you need the backing to keep going. And I think that hopefully the products we're going to start rolling out will resonate and pilots will start feeling like this is a home for them, you know, to then engage other companies and use other software. So we'll see how it goes.
That's it for episode 189 of the Drone Radio Show. I hope you enjoyed hearing from Susan Talbot and Stephen Flynn of Sky Tango. I want to thank the couple for taking the time to speak with me. If you want to learn more about Sky Tango or want to connect with Susan and Steve, check out the webpage at skytango.com. If you like the Drone Radio Show, please consider supporting the podcast with a small donation. The content is always free, but for as little as $1, you can help defray the cost of production. To donate, go to droneradioshow.com/donate or patreon.com/droneradioshow. And thanks for listening. Your support means a lot to me, and I hope you'll listen to more episodes of the Drone Radio Show podcast to hear how others are using drones for business, fun, and research. For the Drone Radio Show, I'm Randy Goers.
This has been the Drone Radio Show podcast. More information on today's show can be found on our website at www.droneradioshow.com. If you're using drone technology for business, fun, or research and would like to share your experience on the show, please visit our website and fill out a guest appearance application. And don't forget to follow us on your favorite social media channels.